Welcome everybody to our Outdoors Online Awesome Possums. We just got done talking a little bit about opossums, and possums is not interchangeable, but we'll be learning more about that soon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Tiana Godsey. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the events coordinator for Natural Lands. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar tonight with Allegheny Land Trust Senior Director of Education and Curriculum, Julie Travaglini. Very excited to learn from you tonight, Julie. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping things to note. This event will be recorded and we will be sharing it with you after the event, so if you need to leave, no worries. Due to the webinar style, you will be muted throughout the event. Please share any comments or questions in the chat, and we will be answering them at the end, if not throughout the webinar. Quickly, before we begin, I'd like to introduce Natural Lands. Many of you are likely familiar with us, but I know we have a few new members joining us this evening. Thank you for your support. We are a nonprofit organization serving Eastern PA and Southern New Jersey to preserve and nurture nature's wonders and create opportunities for joy and discovery in the outdoors for everyone. We've been at it since the early 1950s, and today, nearly 5 million people live within 5 miles of lands under our permanent protection. So how do we do it? Our mission is land for life, nature for all, and we do this in a variety of ways: by saving open space through permanently protecting natural areas by acquisition and voluntary land protection agreements, and helping communities preserve more of their land. So far, we've saved more than 125,000 acres. To care for nature, which we do by taking care of our network of 40 plus nature preserves and 1 public garden located in 2 states and 13 counties, all of which total over 23,000 acres. And of course, this is my favorite, to connect people with the outdoors and each other like we are doing tonight, even online, by creating opportunities for people to connect with and learn from nature. Julie and I were just saying people love to come outside online, even in the cold. So briefly, I did already mention that members make this happen. Thank you all for your support. If you are interested in becoming a member, you will get a discount on lots of events and lots of fun things, so you can join us in the field and see what we're all about. And finally, the moment you have all been waiting for, mostly myself, I'm happy to introduce our presenter, Julie Travaglini. As mentioned before, Julie is Allegheny Land Trust Senior Director of Education and Curriculum. Julie regularly travels the country speaking at conferences on the importance of innovative environmental education for all. She has won multiple awards for her work and has also self-published a children's book called Super Skills of Backyard Bugs. In her spare time, she can be found looking for mushrooms, enjoying our national parks, or crocheting mythical creatures. Julie, take it away.
All right. Got the full bio
I
today.
know.
Sometimes it's the short
Sometimes
one,
it's short.
sometimes it's the full one.
I think it depends what script I'm using.
We'll start the new year off with the full one, I
Right.
guess.
We'll maybe streamline it. We'll see how it gets shorter as we go.
All right. I feel like we've done these enough times now. You could just be like, "Here's Julie,"
Right? Here's
and
Julie. You know
pass it
her.
over.
I'm happy to do
All
that,
right.
honestly. I'm like, Julie's tired of hearing about herself.
Uh, I hear myself talk enough. I certainly don't need to hear my bio anymore. All right. But welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining on this. What day of the week is it? Thursday. I feel like the holiday haze has like not completely lifted, so I still feel like I don't know what day of the week it is or where I'm going or what I'm doing. So thank you all. I'm sure some of you are probably still feeling the same way. So I appreciate you starting out the new year ready to learn and hear and wanting to learn about a really unique kind of like niche animal that doesn't get talked about nearly enough for how incredible the biology is. So, like Tiana said, my name is Julie. I'm the Senior Director of Education and Curriculum for Allegheny Land Trust. Today is all about opossums. Now, if you've never heard of Allegheny Land Trust or ALT, totally okay. I do not expect that you have because we are on the other side of the state over here, just outside of Pittsburgh, and we're much smaller than natural land. So we have about 4,000 acres in 42 municipalities all around Allegheny County. We do have some in some other counties as well, but we're mainly focused in Allegheny County, which is the county Pittsburgh is in. Now, I get what I consider the best job at ALT in that once a piece of property is protected and stewarded for invasives and trail work and all that stuff, I get to then take people outside and teach them about all the incredible wildlife and flora and fauna that we can find outside in our very own neighborhoods. We also do lots of stuff like this. So I actually do, gosh, I don't even know. I think I did like 40 virtual programs last year almost. It was right around 40. It's a very large amount of them. They've become very popular since COVID. And overall, our education team sees a ton of people. Everything from monthly mushroom walks to we do one a month webinars like this one. We have, what else do we do? Oh gosh, a sustainability at home workshop series where we give out like composters and rain barrels and teacher workshops. And in total, it's between 7 and 10,000 people a year. At last year, we did 221 events. So it's a lot of stuff and a lot of people. And it's a lot of fun too. So I'll make sure that I put in the chat our website because I know you guys are like all the way on the other side of the state. But we do have a lot of virtual programs that you can come to from anywhere. We have people sign in from around the world sometimes. So I'll make sure that is in the chat for you. It's just AlleghenyLandTrust.org/events. I think next week we have an owl webinar that has a lot of people signed up for it. So that's exciting. We've got an invasive species webinar and a whole bunch of other stuff coming up. So you can check out and see everything we got going on. But today is all about our friend, the opossum. And we heard Tiana say it, and we heard a couple other people say, I've never heard them called opossums. I just call them possums. But there is a difference, and we shall talk about that difference here momentarily. But an opossum is a marsupial. That means they are in the same class as kangaroos. And now, when we think of a marsupial, we generally think of things like a kangaroo. But the opossum is our only marsupial here in the US and Canada. And there's a ton. So, like you say marsupial, and people can probably name like 6 or less. In fact, it's probably 5 or less marsupials. But there's over 300 species of pouched mammal or marsupial worldwide. Over 300 species. Now, the reason you probably can't name all that many is because we only got the one. In fact, Australia hoards the marsupials. 70% of the world's marsupials are found in Australia. There's a handful in Central America and one here in the US and Canada, our Virginia opossum, but the vast majority are far, far and away in Australia. And there's some example photos of them there. Kangaroos, koalas, bandicoots, Tasmanian devils, wombats, wallabies. Those are some of the more common ones that folks think of. Those are all over in Australia. So most of them are over there. Now, marsupials, what makes them a marsupial is that pouch. And that pouch is Greek meaning pouch. It really wasn't all that complicated. I didn't try to fool you. It's just pouch. Nothing exciting. Sometimes they string a whole bunch of words together to mean one word in English, but this time it is just one word. And when you are a marsupial, that means you have a marsupium, and that is your pouch. Now, this also means that your babies grow mostly outside of your body, and we will talk about that. So to be a marsupial is a very specific class of mammal. So you gotta have fur and feed your baby milk, but you gotta raise that baby in a pouch mostly outside of your body. And we'll talk about the benefits of that here as well momentarily. So only one marsupial in the whole United States, and that's who we're talking about today, our little Virginia opossum. There he is. Now, I want to go back and talk a little bit about marsupial reproduction. And we said that to be a marsupial, you're a mammal, you raise your babies on milk and you have hair or fur. But marsupial reproduction is so insanely different than every other mammal out there. So if you're a marsupial, you are pregnant for a mere fraction of the amount of time as a traditional mammal. Like, think of humans, 9 months, right? If you're a marsupial, you are pregnant on average 13 to 33 days. That is, you are average pregnant 2 weeks to a month. The lowest number is 10 days. There is a marsupial out there in Australia whose baby from conception until being born and crawling into the pouch, that's a 10-day window. So a very, very, very short amount of time. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have elephants that are pregnant forever, it feels like. But a very, very, very short internal pregnancy for a marsupial. Now, when that baby is born, they are what we call altricial, which essentially means they are a little gooey blob that has just enough going on to keep it alive, but barely. Like, it can move, but not very well. It just kind of like squirms around. Think of like a, as much as I don't like maggots, think of like how like a maggot kind of like rolls around like that to move. That's pretty much how they move. They're blind, they can't hear, they can't smell, they have no fur. They can do barely anything. They are literally doing the bare minimum to be considered a living being at that point. And the benefit here is that the marsupial mother avoids all the energy and time needed for growing big babies. That in turn allows her to have more babies. So some marsupials can have up to 20 babies at once. Kangaroos generally only have one or two, but some of our smaller ones can have up to 20. And we think about it this way. So I've never had a child, but I have plenty of friends who have. And by the time they are 8 to 9 months pregnant, they are moving very slow. They don't feel well. They can't bend and be as active as they normally can. And that doesn't really fly in nature. So, us as people, by 8 or 9 months pregnant, it's okay that you have slowed down and you aren't as flexible and you maybe can't hide from predators, like you're not ducking under furniture anytime soon, right? In nature, that's going to get you eaten by a predator. So, this is kind of an adaptation for them to be able to have lots of babies really quickly, and the mother doesn't go through that period where she's not very mobile and she's not feeling very good. And it allows for a little bit higher success rates for survival for them. Now, marsupial babies across the board, not just baby kangaroos, but all baby marsupials are called joeys. So, in fact, a baby opossum is called a joey, just like a baby kangaroo is. So, really interesting reproduction there, and just incredibly different from everything else with fur and hair on the planet. Think about us, 9 months. Elephants is like 2 years, I think, or something totally ridiculous. But nothing's coming after an elephant, so it doesn't matter. They can spend 2 years having a baby. But kangaroos and some of our especially smaller opossums and marsupials in general don't have that luxury. So they are having that baby in like a month, which is wild. Now, once the baby is born, and I think I'll talk about this on the next slide, but the main, like we said, they can't see, they can't hear, they got nothing going on except being a little goo ball. The babies will follow a trail from being born. The mother will lick a trail from birth up to her pouch so that the babies can find their way into the pouch. And that is the only way they get there, is by feeling for the goo, essentially, of the mother's licking, which is, kind of gross, but it is what it is. She licks a trail and they all follow her up into that pouch where they attach to a nipple, which is pretty crazy. Now, here we go. Here's where we got to talk about the etymology, the naming here. Possums with a P and opossums, totally different. So, opossums have many, many species. We have the Virginia opossum, and possums are Australian, and they have like 70 of their own species. So they've got their like Virginia possum down in Australia that is totally separate than what we have here. So like an opossum, I think there's 30-ish species of opossums, and then there's 70 plus species of possums, and they do not live in and amongst each other. They're totally separate species. They're actually in different orders, so they are not related. Opossums and possums are far away evolutionarily. They're in the same class, but they are miles away, both in terms of where they live and kind of how they've evolved too. They're wildly different creatures. So next time you hear someone call our opossums a possum, you can tell them that they are actually referring to an Australian marsupial, because everyone loves a know-it-all in the friend group who will bring that fact up at any possible time. Oh, I lied. 126 species. Why did I get 30? Why is 30 stuck in my head? I don't know. It's after the holidays. I was off by a lot. I was off by like 100, so we'll just let that go. But there are over 120 species of opossums. And again, we have the Virginia opossum. So only one out of that 126. There's 125 live in other places. Now, opossum is derived from the Native American language, the Powhatan language, and it translates to white dog or dog like beast, which I think is particularly interesting. Sometimes I feel like if I see an opossum outside and I'm maybe not wearing my glasses, I would very quickly say, what dog is that? You know, from far in a distance, you look and you're like, is that a dog? Especially without my glasses. But no, but it does translate from white dog from Powhatan. Now, Native Americans had their own name for it, but the opossum was first described by Europeans in the United States around 1607 by John Smith, who was one of the first settlers to Jamestown. So the opossum was described very, very early in the European American history, and opossums were actually described first before the Australian possums were described by Europeans. So Europeans ended up in the US before they ended up in Australia, and therefore they borrowed the term possum from opossum to describe what they were seeing there, because it was similar in form and function to what they knew of in what is now the United States. So, what came first, the opossum or the possum? Well, according to Europeans, the opossum was first, but like evolutionarily, it's probably the possum itself. Down in Australia. But according to white people who went off and discovered lots of things, the opossum was described first in 1607, so a very long time ago. Now, opossums are nocturnal, and that means they love to come out at night. Now, what that does not mean is that they are sick if they come out in the day. We tend to, sometimes we think of these things in very black and white terms, when in reality, sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night, right, and can't sleep. It's the same for animals. Like, just because we're technically diurnal, we're supposed to be up during the day, my partner is happy as a clam at 3 in the morning. I'm not. I'm dead to the world. Like, we all have kind of our individual takes on what makes us happiest around what we're supposed to be doing, right? And it's similar for animals as well. Nocturnal, yeah, they're mostly active during that time, but you're going to see them at dusk. You're going to see them during the day. You're going to see them out and about. Now, they're most active when they're out foraging and they're out mating at nighttime, but that does not exclusively restrict them to the evening hours. In fact, I will share a photo of a possum that I discovered in my, well, I didn't discover it, my dogs discovered it, and it was a fine story. The opossum was fine, but he was just out and about during the day. He was a little guy. So nocturnal, yes, most active then. but that doesn't mean they're ill if they're out during the day. And we will actually talk about opossums and rabies and some of the other diseases that they could potentially carry here in a bit as well. I think I saw a couple questions in the chat. Cuteness factor is high. They are adorable. Oh, you ran into an opossum at the yeah. So out and about, minding their own business, doing opossum stuff, not really wanting to be bothered, I'm sure. All right. So let's look at the body of an opossum. And here's where we kind of talk about someone said that they saw an opossum that was along the side of the road, and that sometimes happens. Well, one of the reasons why we see opossums so readily as roadkill, sadly, is that they are not built for speed. So these are not animals that are reaching max speeds that are going to be able to run off the road really quickly or be able to adapt and kind of like switch their brain and go into fight or flight mode really quickly. They're large. They're not large, but they're a little bit chunky, and they kind of waddle, and they just aren't meant to be able to avoid a whole ton of predation by vehicle, we'll say. Like, that's just not the easiest thing for them to escape from. We'll talk about another reason here in a bit, but that's a big one, is that their bodies just, they're not svelte and they're not built for speed. They're actually about house cat or very small dog sized, 4 to 7 pounds. That's a really small dog. I consider my dog small, and he's 40 pounds, so that's like a mini like nugget of a dog if you have a 4 to 7 pound dog. The males tend to be slightly larger, and they do tend to be slightly larger in the northern part of their range. So in our area and up into Canada, they can be a little bit bigger than their southern counterparts. And that's generally because they are more highly adapted to people. We leave stuff around for them to eat. So they get a little bigger, and they also get a little bigger because it's colder here. They need that extra fat and fur to keep them warm in the wintertime. So it's kind of a combo. It's kind of that nature is colder and crueler here, and they need to be able to survive it. So they need a little bit more meat on their bones. And it's also because we're messy and we make a lot of trash, and they will eat anything. And therefore, we feed them a lot, and they get bigger. Another interesting take and tidbit about an opossum is that they have what is called a sagittal crest on their skull. And this is one way, if you're out hiking in the woods, sometimes you see skulls every now and again just laying around and you wonder what kind of animal it's from. This is one of the ways that you can really, really quickly tell that it's from an opossum. And opossum skulls happen fairly frequently because they are prey animals to lots and lots of different creatures out there. So a lot of the skulls that we come across in nature are opossums. And if you look, a sagittal crest, I've got that picture on the screen with the arrow pointing of it. It's basically a bone mohawk down the middle of their skull. And that's the sagittal bone on the top of their head right there, but it looks like a bone mohawk is what I like to call it, is its very scientific name, aside from sagittal crest, is bone mohawk. But they have that on their skull, and that's a telltale that it is an opossum skull. Now, another telltale, if you see a skull, or just like a fun fact to throw out at your next like family dinner party, is that opossums have the most teeth of any North American mammal. 50. They fit 50 teeth inside of their mouth. Now, by comparison, humans have 32. So they have way more teeth than we do. And sometimes those teeth get them in trouble because when they're scared, they hiss and they bare their teeth and they look really ferocious and scary because you see like it's like the Joker with his like smile drawn on his face. It's like lots of teeth like in your face, but not so scary. Um Pretty harmless creatures for the most part, but they have a ton of teeth, more than bears, more than coyotes, foxes, wolves, any of that. They've got more teeth than that, so pretty neat stuff there. Their brain, however, what they have in teeth, they do not have in brains. So their brains are itty bitty, teeny tiny, a fifth of the size of a raccoon brain. Now, if you look at that skull, There's a big old spot for eyeballs and a whole lot of teeth crammed in there and a big old long snout and the bone mohawk they've got going on there. Not a lot of room for a brain. These are fairly simple creatures. They are sweet but simple, is what we call them. In the South, they might say, "Bless their hearts." they're they're simple. They're simple creatures. Now, what they lack in brains but make up for in teeth, they also make up for in nipples. So they have a ton of nipples, and their nipples are almost like a bullseye, which makes a lot of sense because they've got to get the babies from having them up into the pouch to attach to a nipple to feed because that's all the baby's got going. So they get them up into the pouch and they attach onto a nipple. And this is where survival of the fittest comes into play because there are 13 nipples. And while that's a lot of nipples, it's not always enough because there might be more than 13 babies. So if you are the last little baby in there and you are like baby 14 or 15, you don't make it unless you fight a sibling to the death for a nipple. You are going to survive in this world. So they have lots of babies, they have lots of nipples to support the babies, and sometimes it's still not enough depending on how many babies they have. And I wonder too, like there's 12 with the one in the center. I wonder, like, do you get like extra protein in your milk if you like get to the center nipple? I don't know. I feel like the center nipple should be like, what was it called in like the Hunger Games, or if you got to like the middle, you got like an award. I don't know. I feel like Hunger Games opossum style with nipples, um, but you didn't have that on your 2026 bingo card. Oh gosh. Anywho, now opossums don't have very big brains, but they got a lot of teeth and they got a lot of nipples, but they don't get to use any of those body parts for very long. They are incredibly short lived creatures. They only live 1 to 2 years, very, very short. And they undergo something called rapid senescence. And senescence is essentially how quickly your body deteriorates as you age. By the time they're two, they're already start like on their second birthday, if they make it that long, they're showing fairly big signs of aging. And some of those signs are everything from like more graying in the face. And one of the most common things is blindness. So, opossums, as they age, have a very, very high chance of blindness. And when this starts to happen, they get like cataracts in their eyes starts to get fuzzy looking, almost like when our dogs age, and you can notice their eyes are a little cloudy. That starts to happen to opossums. So if you see an opossum and you look and their eyes are a little cloudy, you can guarantee they're on their last leg of life, essentially. And then what happens from there is the muscles around their eyes kind of weaken. They really have, for everything else they've got going on, the eyes didn't evolve with all the other parts, right? So as they age, the eyeball musculature around the eyes starts to deteriorate and their eyes cross. So you see a lot of possums as they age with the cloudy, crossed eyes. And we'll talk about how that plays into folklore here in just a little bit. But they're also highly prone to arthritis as well. So they age incredibly quickly and they deteriorate incredibly quickly as well. And that's another trait that lends itself to the predation rates of opossums. So, tons and tons of things, everything from, our feral cats to dogs, if they get out, will attack an opossum, to foxes, especially attacking the young, and lots of creatures. Snakes will take out small opossums if they're big enough babies. So, tons and tons of creatures feed on opossums. So they essentially age and die very quickly to help them not fall victim to predation so that they can kind of die more naturally than being eaten by something, which is not a very peaceful way to go, I would imagine. So, again, variable in size, 4 to 7 pounds, a little bigger up here, both in urban and northern areas, tons of teeth, tons of nipples, bone mohawk, teeny brains, short lives. So opossums have some pretty interesting biology going on. And I want to show you an opossum track because especially this time of year, you will see opossum tracks because they are not out there hibernating. They are not animals that sleep through the winter, so they are out year round foraging for food. And one of the easiest ways to see them is by tracks in the morning, especially if you go out by like your bird feeders or your trash cans or anywhere else you might have some snacks laying around. You might see an opossum track. Now, opossums have 5 toes on the front, 2 feet, and 5 toes on the back. There are tons of creatures out there that have not symmetrical feet. So some will have 4 on the front and 5 in the back, or vice versa, 5 in the front and 4 in the back. But opossums do have the symmetrical 5 in front and 5 in the back. If you look at the track, the one on the top there is the front feet, and the one in the back is the bottom feet. That red arrow is pointing to the opposable back toe. So opossums do have the opposable back toe, kind of like our thumb. Every toe on the opossum will have a claw except that opposable toe. So if you look at that track, you can see the claws, where the claws dug into the snow on that top track, and it's a little harder to see on the bottom track, but they're there. The claws on those 4 toes that are close together, and then kind of almost at a 90-degree angle, you will see that opposable toe, and it will be rounded without the claw on the tip. Their tracks tend to be close together too because, like we said, they're not built for speed. When you're running, your tracks are farther apart because you're taking longer strides. When you're walking is kind of like the average stride length between front and back for an animal. And when you are what we call a waddler, very scientific term, but if you are a waddler, like an opossum or like a beaver, your tracks are really close together because when you waddle, you are taking very small steps. So their tracks are close together, 5 toes, 5 toes, one of which is that opposable thumb at the 90-degree angle. And you may even see a tail track. Not always, but sometimes opossums will drag their tail, and you will see that little like snake-like looking tail track right behind the tracks from where they're walking. So pretty unique tracks for around here with the 5 and 5 and that really 90-degree toe in that back. It almost looks like the letter L with that back foot. Kristen says, is there a purpose to the opposable toe on the back feet? Yeah, totally. It helps them climb. So opossums are really pretty darn good at climbing for their body shape. Like you wouldn't think they'd be able to climb things very well, but they do climb, especially like your trash cans to get into stuff. But that does help them balance and kind of stand up and climb and move to reach food. Gosh, there we go. I do want to talk a little bit more about joeys because we are in the heart of the breeding season. So opossums are currently breeding right now. They could be I mean, they breed anytime December through October. So there's really very few months of the year, like one, that they couldn't possibly have babies. And even then, if they get pregnant in October, they can still have them in November. So joeys are possible most, if not all, of the year, and they have numerous litters a year. They are born gestationally at the equivalent of 8 to 12 weeks for a human baby. Like at 8 to 12 weeks, you still like aren't telling people because it's still like early days, right? But that's when the joey is born, ready to go. They're the size of a bee, a honeybee, a tiny little honeybee when they're born, and that's pretty typical. I think kangaroos are like jelly bean sized when they're born, which is wild. And again, they're totally altricial, which means they are basically useless little blobs of goo, vaguely formed into a pink bean, essentially, that climbs out once they are born and follows a licked trail all the way up to the pouch with all those nipples. Now, the reason why we don't see baby opossums super often is because they climb into that pouch and they hide in there for almost 3 months. So they're in the pouch pretty much 3 times longer than what they were inside the mother's body. Now, once we start to see them, they are out of the pouch. So we almost never see joeys in that in between stage. If a joey is out of the pouch before it is able to crawl onto its mother's back, it is not going to survive because they cannot. If they can't climb out and on top of the mother's back, that's how she carries them around, they won't make it. And she's not going to do much to help it either. She's not going to pick it up and put it back there. So if it's falls out, gets kicked out, gets sick, and comes out of the pouch, that's kind of it. Now, that being said, only about 1 in 10 survive fully to adulthood. Now, a lot of the babies make it, yes, but once they are too big for the mother's back and they go out on their own, they're still kind of in that intermediate juvenile phase, and that's where a lot of them get themselves into trouble because they're out looking for mates, they're out looking for food on their own, and that's when they get to be, predators get them, or they get hit by cars, or any number of things can happen to them in kind of that juvenile teenage phase almost, where they are too big for the pouch, no longer dependent on mom, out on their own, but not yet adults. So kind of that intermediate phase is when they really get into some trouble, and that's where most of the mortality is coming from there. Bridget says the Joeys are so small. The picture reminds me of the opossum family in The Wild Robot. I have not seen that movie. That is something you should also know about me is if you are asking, have you seen that movie? 99% of the time the answer is no. Because I just like am terrible at seeing movies. Even like classics I have not seen. So if you're like, have you seen that movie? Almost willing to like bet a lot of money that the answer is no. But maybe I'll watch that now to see the opossums. And now, if you watch that movie regularly, you can go back and like judge it on how well represented the opossum is. Like, is it accurate? Are they portraying the opossum accurately to real science? So that's also fun too. Everyone loves that friend. Not only the friend that will like correct them on like weird animal etymology, but also the friend that will sit and watch a movie and be like, that's not right for a polar bear. So be that friend too. It'll be really popular with your friend group. Now, opossum diets. I didn't even need to put that. Anything. Literally, if it fits in their mouth, they're going to eat it. They're omnivores. They'll eat anything they find. They're considered pests in certain farming communities because they will get into poultry or chicken farms, and gosh darn if they don't love eggs. So, as you can imagine, being a farmer who relies on chickens and poultry laying eggs, you do not want an opossum in there enjoying and having itself a feast on your goods, essentially. So they can be pests in certain parts of where they live, and that's kind of true for a lot of creatures that it is their native habitat, but based on human activities, we now call them a pest because they're in our way. So that's not exclusive to the opossum. So anything that fits in its mouth, nut, berries, meat, vegetable, doesn't matter. They'll eat it. Now, there has been lots of talk over the last few years about opossums being incredible pest control in the form of eating a ton of ticks. And I've seen that go around, and I've seen it go around so many times. I see it everywhere, and I'm always just like, oh, guys, maybe too early for this. The jury is out. The science is not there yet. So, yes, there have been scientific studies that show opossums eat ticks, but there's also been studies done that have looked at the stomach contents of an opossum and found zero ticks. That study I linked to there was out of a university in Illinois. So they're finding that maybe the more urban opossums don't eat any ticks because they don't have to, because there's plenty of other things for them to eat. But maybe the rural ones are the ones eating ticks. So it really depends on where the opossum lives and food availability. But the science really is just not there for us to fully say opossums are great tick control. Who is really great tick control though? Chickens. Chickens are like the dumpsters of domesticated animals. Like chickens will eat literally anything you put in front of them. And ticks are one of those things that they will eat a lot of. So if you can have chickens, they are great tick control. But opossums, we don't know yet. We need a lot more scientists making opossums throw up to study what they ate before we can really decisively say one way or another. And again, it's probably just going to depend on where they live and the food availability. So that picture there is a picture I took. And here's my fun opossum story for you is that now I have a covered porch and my backyard is very small. I can mow the whole thing in probably 15 minutes, but I have spent a lot of time over the last handful of years turning my yard into a backyard sanctuary, essentially lots of native plants and bird feeders and water and all that jazz out there. So of course I get lots of creatures, and I've had everything from not snakes yet, surprisingly, but lots of cool stuff, including skunks and opossums. And I had a little juvenile opossum that I discovered because my dogs one day would just not leave my outside trash can alone. They were sniffing around it, they were drooling, they were like nudging it, and I was like, oh my gosh, you guys are being so irritating. Like, leave my trash can alone. And of course, I went out there and I looked, but I looked like I like peeked in and was like, there's nothing in there. Like I didn't move anything. I didn't like put any real effort into actually checking the trash can. And they kept up for it for like 2 days. They were so annoying. They would like beeline for my trash can and they would not leave it alone. So finally my partner went out there and he's like, I'm gonna look and see what's in the trash can. So he starts digging around in there and I hear him yell, there's a whole opossum in the trash can. I was like, well, is it alive? And it was. It was just a little guy. But he had found his way in and then could not find his way out. So my dogs were just like having a really great time smelling this opossum, but they couldn't get to him. And to be fair to my dogs, they were incredibly polite about the situation. They did not bark. They did not like knock it over. They didn't like chew a hole through it to get to him or anything. They were very polite. But ended up, I took him out, and my partner's like, well, you got to take it out and deal with it. I was like, why? And he's like, well, you studied like biology, like you're an environmental like scientist. And I was like, my nothing in my background involved shooing wild animals. So, but I did. I took it out in the yard, and I don't know why I was like so like amped up about it, but I just like knocked it over and ran. It was an opossum. I know better, but I was still just like, ugh. And I knocked it over, and he ran off. But he comes back. I think he's well, maybe not. This was 2 years ago, so he's probably gone. It's probably another opossum. But I have another one that hangs out, and every now and again, the dogs get a whiff of him, and I look around, and he came back for quite a bit. Like the whole summer, he was around because the dog would want to go out in the middle of the night to go pee, and he would find it on the porch again in the middle of the night because it's nocturnal, and he would try to play with it at like 2 in the morning. So we had to be very cautious. He had no idea. He has no hunting instinct whatsoever, which was good. But we had to spend the whole summer making sure Rex did not find his opossum again in the middle of the night. But that's my fun opossum story. But when you create a backyard habitat, you're creating a backyard habitat for all sorts of wildlife, not just the bees and the butterflies, right? You got to support everybody. And apparently, my trash can was supporting the opossum that time. But I hopefully he had a good opossum life. Now, some other really interesting adaptations of opossums. We said they have that opposable thumb in the back that helps them grip and move and climb a little bit. They also have prehensile tails, so they can wrap that long rat looking tail around things to help them hang on and to help them maneuver and grip and grasp. They also, of course, play possum, which we know now. Possum and opossum is not the same, but playing possum is in fact something they do, and it's essentially an extreme fear response. It's like a opossum panic attack kind of like sets in and they don't know what else to do, so they just like lay down and pretend to be dead. And they're so good at it that their mouth hangs open. They'll like release their bowels, so it smells and it's gross, and they make a stink and they'll roll over. And it's not just like for a minute or two, they can do that for hours. Like hours. They'll sit there pretending to be dead. And that's another way they get hit by cars all the time. One is by being not super speedy, and the other is that they play dead because they're scared and then they do die because they're in the middle of the road not moving. So that's another reason why we see them as roadkill so often, is because sometimes they get that extreme fear response when a car comes up on them quickly, and they, do their death feigning, and then they do get hit. So it's not great. It helps them sometimes, but it also does not help them when they do that on the road. They can also do that if they're trying to convince a predator that they are not going to attack or threaten their young. So we all know that like mother animals are just like on another playing field when it comes to aggression when they have a baby. And if an opossum comes upon an animal with a young, it will feign death just to be like, I'm out. Like, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not coming near you. Like, don't bother with me. Don't come get me. Don't care about your baby. And they will do that as a way to just essentially get the mother and baby to move on and not see them as a threat. And they'll, like we said, they'll do that for hours. So sometimes you think an opossum is dead and you go to move it and it suddenly wakes back up. So kind of like a zombie thing going on. But it is pretty wild to see them do it. Their tongue hangs out. It's crazy. Crazy, crazy. Now we have to talk about diseases in opossums because they very often get confused with animals that are rabid. And that's because opossums, one of their main defenses, they don't have a lot. They're not exactly full of defensive maneuvers here. But one of their defensive behaviors is opening their mouth and hissing, and sometimes they get a little spitty, and that can be confused with the rabid behavior of like foaming at the mouth in aggression. So just because their mouth is open and they're hissing does not mean they're ill. That's actually one of like two ways they can get you to leave them alone. So they're not sick. They just want to be left alone. And in fact, opossums are naturally resistant to rabies. They are not rabies vectors because their body temperature is naturally too low to incubate the rabies virus. So, rabies needs a higher body temperature to incubate and reproduce in the body, and opossums have naturally a lower body temperature than that. So, they are not rabies carriers. They can host other things though, like parasites are very, very common. And a lot of diseases like tuberculosis, leptospirosis, tularemia. We see like tularemia, especially, is transmitted, and well, I guess TB is less so, but like leptospirosis and tularemia tend to be easily passed, such as parasites in nature, because when your diet consists of literally anything you can eat, the odds of you picking up something are very, very high. So, animals that are adapted to eat literally anything are also often succumbing to disease because it's kind of a trade off. You can't eat anything without trading something off for that. And the trade off is sometimes getting a disease. Um, because you're eating anything and everything can carry anything and everything in it. So it's a bit of a trade off there. So they're not carrying rabies. They're not going to give you rabies or any of that scary stuff. I mean, leptospirosis and tularemia and TB are not great either, but not as pretty much fatal as rabies is. So, definitely some things to keep a lookout for, and you should absolutely not, like, I was not going to reach in and scoop up that little opossum, as much and as adorable as he was, because you can still get lots of other nasty things that aren't great. So, never handle wild animals. And I always like to wrap up. So far we've learned like a whole lot about opossums. We've learned about their biology and their reproduction and their cousins over in Australia and what they eat and kind of how you can ID tracks and how their biology is really unique. But I always like to wrap up these talks with talking about the folklore of that animal because there's always folklore all the way back from indigenous Native American times up until even, fairly recently in our history with William Taft, President William Taft. So opossums across time have kind of been seen, well, Native Americans saw them as a trickster or an easily embarrassed buffoon. They were kind of like the like wah wah animals of, not very civilized, not very smart. And a lot of that comes from the cross eyes. So remember we said that they have that rapid senescence, which means they age very, very quickly and very rapidly, and blindness is very common, and those eyes lose the musculature around them and they cross, well, that gives them the look of not being very smart. So that's where that comes in. That's where we got that from. So often in cartoons, we'll see them portrayed that way, but really it's just their natural aging happening. Now, Native Americans saw them as a symbol of protection, probably because of the pouch, right? We see the pouch as a protection, but we also have eaten them. They were once a very popular game animal, and in fact, opossums are not native west of the Rockies. So, like when we pulled up the map, I pulled up the map very briefly, but opossums are in the West Coast now, but that's not their native range. So we actually took them there as a game animal to eat them during the Great Depression. So we introduced them there. They're now thriving because they're very highly adaptable. But we introduced them there as something to eat during the Great Depression. And even in lots of cookbooks, there are recipes for possum pie. So lots of history there and interesting history there too. President William Taft even tried to capitalize because I guess he didn't have many like new ideas. Maybe I don't know. I don't know anything about William Taft, so maybe I shouldn't judge. But he wanted to get a piece of essentially Teddy Roosevelt's insane success with the teddy bear. If you didn't know, like the teddy bear is a Teddy Roosevelt thing. So he was like, I want to do that. So he had Billy Possum for his kind of animal. And spoiler alert, it didn't go well. So, like, it never caught on like the teddy bear did. We certainly don't have Billy Possums anywhere, and you don't give someone a Billy Possum for, having a kid or when they have an ouch. We don't hand them Billy Possum, we hand them a teddy bear, right? So, never really stuck like Teddy Roosevelt's teddy bear did. But he tried, and he gave it a solid effort. And I mean, honestly, his toy wasn't very cute. Like, look at it. That's its picture. They could have done better. They could have done better with that. Maybe if it was cuter, Billy, or they should have called it like Oscar Opossum, like to go with the actual. I don't know. I'll leave it alone. But poor marketing on William Taft's part. And of course, before we fully wrap up, I like to put a funny in all of my talks because I think we should always end with a laugh. So I always have to put a related little fun bit in here before we wrap up and open it up for any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Julie. As always, so awesome. I learned so much and had fun while doing it, which is my favorite way to learn. We did have one question submitted in the Q&A.
Ooh,
Periodic,
okay.
yeah, we had someone ask periodically, some get into my garage. Last summer, I found a juvenile possum that seemed dehydrated and moving slowly. I tried to provide water, transport it, or encourage it to move back outside, but it died. What can I do next time to make sure this doesn't happen and I can help it get back to its home environment?
Honestly, not much. A lot of animals move in or look for warmth in the wintertime or when it gets colder. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot we can do. You can really make sure there's no like holes or entry points into your garage. So like putting up if you like have a hole or you see where an animal is dug, putting some fencing down there so they can't get in. I mean, really, once it's in, the only thing to do is like try to like not get it into like a container to take it back outside, but oh yeah, totally take it outside. Um, yeah, if you can safely, again, don't pick it up. You don't want to get bit or scratched. That's a bad thing. But if you can kind of like take a broom and kind of nudge it into like a trash can and take him back outside, that's a good thing to do for him. But yeah, really just preventing them from getting in is the biggest thing. And honestly, like we said, 1 in 10 uh, juveniles don't make it to adulthood. So unfortunately, the odds are not great. That's why they have like so many babies in a year. They gotta up the odds.
More babies.
Yeah.
Kristen asks, do babies stay in the same location as the mom or do they leave? I always have them in my yard every year for over 20 years, wondering if they are all related or not.
Ooh, yeah,
Maybe.
no, maybe.
Awesome
Um,
family.
we'd have to get like an opossum geneticist in, do
Yes.
some blood work. But it depends. The females and males, like the males tend to go a little bit farther looking for mates and food. They don't go super far because again they're opossums and they're not meant for like long distance running anytime soon. So they will stay in the same general area and they're not migratory. So there's a good chance if they're not directly, the direct kin, they might be nieces and nephews or cousins to the original ones. So they don't have a huge territory, no.
That's really cute. They might all be somewhat related.
Could be.
Yeah. Lori asks, does the female defend her young?
Nah.
You go.
She does the death response and that's it. Get on your own.
Defend
Carry them
yourselves.
around on her back until they don't fit anymore. But if like something scares her, she's gonna flop right over on them, and it is their job to just hopefully don't move. But no, she is not going to battle for the babies anytime soon. Again, that's why she has so many. She's got to up the odds that some of them will make it.
Wow. I think that people in the chat were mentioning Wild Robot. I keep thinking of that scene as well. I think there's one too where the possum baby falls off the back and they're just like, whatever.
Yeah, she'll just keep
Yeah.
going. Oops.
Yeah.
That's one thing that they can't count. So
Yes.
if they have 8 up there and they lose a few, they don't know.
No. Rob asks, does their tail have any special function? Question.
Yeah, so it is opposable, so they can use it to hold on to things, to grip, to grasp. Especially important when they are climbing to look for food. They will use that tail to hang on.
That's awesome. It's kind of like an extra thumb, but like long thumb.
Pretty much, pretty
Yeah.
much. A
Lori,
long ratty thumb. It's
long
very,
ratty thumb.
it's very rat-like.
Lori asks, if one approaches an opossum, do they get mean or just look mean?
Yeah, they just look mean.
Just look mean.
I mean, should you go up to it and like try to touch it? No.
Don't go
they
petting
they
wildlife.
want you to think they are vicious, ferocious creatures, but
Yes.
they are peaceful creatures. They'll hiss and they'll bare their teeth, and they might like click and chatter, but that's about all they got. And then if you yeah, they play dead, but that's literally all they have.
Oh. Elliot asked, is it true they sleep hanging from their tail?
No.
No. Miss. A myth. Possum myth.
Yep.
Myth.
Myth busted.
Myth busted. Amazing. Well, if anyone has any other questions, feel free to add them in the chat, or you can also email Julie at her email there. So please stay tuned this fall, or sorry, this fall, wow, this winter and spring. You can tell that I have an old script in front of me, but please stay tuned. We have more coming. We have sensational snakes coming in February, and then owls coming in March. So please come back for
Yep.
more.